Rick Harrison may be best known for his sharp deals and snappy comebacks on Pawn Stars. But what many people don't realize is that the man behind the shop left behind more than just rare artifacts and gold chains. What he's created over the years is a legacy that goes far beyond the neon signs of the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas. But what's truly surprising is what he's kept hidden behind closed doors. And when that finally came to light, it changed the way people saw him. When Pawn Stars first aired in 2009, few expected it to become a cultural phenomenon. But Rick had a natural magnetism, part streetwise businessman, part history buff. Viewers weren't just watching people buy and sell items. They were watching Rick analyze everything from antique guns to quirky memorabilia with laser-like precision. And while the shop was real, the stories it held were bigger than reality TV. What many don't know is that Rick didn't just inherit the pawn shop from his father, the old man. He built it through decades of trial, hustle, and setbacks. Before the fame, Rick had been working behind the counter since the age of 13, cutting deals and learning how to spot a fake from a mile away. The shop became his world, and over time, he expanded it into an empire. Books, tours, merchandise, and international recognition. But Rick wasn't just about fame and fortune. Behind the scenes, he dealt with personal battles that never made it into the final cut of the show. Financial stress, legal disputes with former partners, and family conflicts. These were the real costs of success. And eventually, those cracks in the armor began to show. In recent years, whispers began circulating about Rick stepping back. He appeared less frequently at the shop. Fans speculated, was he retiring? Was something wrong? And then came the shocker. Rick had quietly restructured his estate. And what he chose to include and exclude caught everyone off guard. Reports surfaced that Rick had made drastic changes to his will, business holdings, and even public responsibilities. Some claimed he was grooming new leadership. Others whispered about deeper family rifts. The shift wasn't publicized, but when insiders began leaking documents and statements, people started piecing the puzzle together. The world knew Rick as the tough but fair businessman who'd never let a deal go bad. But what he left behind, the decisions he made, the people he cut off, and the strange items that surfaced later, was anything but expected. And that's where the story really starts to twist. As Rick began quietly reshaping his future behind the scenes, the public narrative still painted him as the steady hand behind the world's most famous pawn shop. But something was brewing inside the Harrison family that would soon ignite headlines. And it all started with someone you'd expect to be at the center of everything, his own son, Corey Harrison. Fans of Pawn Stars know Corey as Big Hoss, the heir apparent. He's been there since the beginning, helping run the shop and serving as Rick's right-hand man. So when documents emerged showing that Corey had allegedly been left out of major decisions about the business and estate, the internet went into a frenzy. How could Rick, someone so vocal about the importance of family, suddenly sideline his own son? It wasn't long before rumors took root. Some said Corey had been pulling away from the business on his own terms, exploring new ventures and wanting out of the pawn life. Others claimed Rick didn't approve of Corey's personal lifestyle or business choices, leading to a silent fallout. But neither Rick nor Corey gave the public much to work with. The silence only made things more suspicious. Then came a leak, anonymous but compelling. A supposed insider claimed that Rick had formally reorganized ownership of several key business entities, cutting Corey out of the controlling stake. Even more surprising, the same leak suggested that assets once thought to be jointly held were quietly transferred elsewhere, some to Rick's other children, some to legal entities no one could trace. Corey, it seemed, was no longer the golden boy of the gold and silver empire. When Corey finally responded in an interview, he played it cool. He brushed off the rumors and said the family was solid, but his words didn't quite match his body language, and fans noticed. He looked tired, distant, almost like someone going through something he wasn't allowed to talk about. And the public, they were hooked. People speculated everything from family betrayal to legal battles waiting to explode. The man who made a fortune telling people the true value of things was suddenly the center of a story full of secrets, silence, and strained ties. But if Rick really was sidelining Corey, the bigger question was, why? Was there someone else Rick trusted more with the future of the empire? Or was there something about Corey's involvement that Rick found threatening? Whatever the case, one thing was clear. Rick Harrison was no longer playing by the family-first rules he once preached on national TV. He was making moves in the shadows, moves that would change not just his legacy, but the relationships closest to him. While the spotlight had always been on Corey as the natural successor to the Harrison legacy, Rick had quietly been bringing someone else into the fold, someone who wasn't on the public's radar. That's when the rumors about a new golden child started gaining steam. It all began when fans noticed a mysterious new face popping up behind the counters of the gold and silver pawn shop. He wasn't a TV regular, and most people had no idea who he was. But those paying attention saw him in the background of social media posts, subtly tagged in company-related events, and even listed in a few obscure business filings connected to the shop. Digging deeper, internet sleuths identified the man as Adam Harrison, Rick's lesser-known son. Unlike Corey and Jake, Adam had intentionally stayed away from the limelight. He didn't appear on Pawn Stars, didn't chase celebrity status, and hadn't been involved in the pawn shop until now. Suddenly, he was everywhere behind the scenes. Whispers grew louder. Was Adam Rick's real choice to inherit the empire? Was this Rick's way of resetting the future of the business on his own terms, without public pressure? People started connecting dots. Adam reportedly had a background in finance, tech, and strategy, skills Rick had long claimed were lacking in Corey's more old-school approach. Others said Adam had been quietly advising Rick for years and was the real brain behind several of the shop's latest business expansions. And here's where things got even stranger. Not long after Adam's name surfaced, documents started showing up listing him as a partial owner in new business entities tied to Rick's brand. These weren't just paper companies, they were tied to real estate, investments, and even rights management over Pawn Stars-related merchandise. If Corey was being phased out, Adam seemed to be sliding in seamlessly. But why the secrecy? That's what had fans divided. Some believed Rick was simply trying to give one of his sons a chance outside of the pressure of public opinion. Others felt it was a calculated, cold shift, a strategic replacement of the familiar with the discreet. Critics didn't hold back. Online forums exploded with debates, calling Rick out for what looked like a betrayal of the very values he preached: honesty, transparency, and family loyalty. Others praised him, saying he was making a smart move by investing in someone who could evolve the brand beyond reality TV. Still, the fact that Rick never addressed any of this publicly only made the theories swirl harder. Was this part of a long-term plan to hand the keys over quietly? Or was there a deeper rift that Rick wanted to avoid airing out in public? But if fans thought this was the end of the surprises, they were wrong. Because what Rick did next shook even his most loyal supporters, and it had nothing to do with family. Everyone knew the gold and silver pawn shop was filled with rare treasures, historical artifacts, vintage collectibles, and the occasional bizarre oddity. But what most people didn't know was that beneath all of it, something much more personal was hidden. A place Rick never talked about on camera. A space even the most dedicated fans didn't know existed. We're talking about Rick's secret vault, a reinforced underground chamber buried beneath the shop itself. It wasn't listed on any shop blueprints and wasn't featured in a single episode of Pawn Stars. Even most employees weren't aware of its existence. So, how did the truth finally come out? It started with a leaked internal inventory report after a legal dispute involving the shop's assets. Within the paperwork was a cryptic line item: Subterranean Archive, Restricted Access, RH only. That one line sent curious minds spiraling. And soon enough, whistleblowers began speaking out, former employees who claimed they had seen Rick disappear into a secured back stairwell behind a locked steel door. According to them, the vault was more than just a room for storing expensive items. It was Rick's private museum, filled with things so valuable, controversial, or mysterious that he didn't want them on display. We're talking confidential letters, vintage weapons, items with dark histories, and rare historical documents that were never meant to leave private collections. One ex-employee claimed he'd seen a handwritten letter from Abraham Lincoln, complete with presidential seal. Another swore there was an original Tesla coil prototype tucked into a corner, alongside sealed boxes marked "confiscated." There were even rumors of items with mob ties, objects that had connections to Las Vegas' seedy underbelly before the city turned into the tourist hub we know today. And yet, the most curious thing about the vault wasn't the items themselves. It was what Rick kept hidden inside a small, locked cabinet at the back of the chamber. Sources who glimpsed it described it as a time capsule of sorts. It contained handwritten journals, family photos, letters addressed to each of his sons, and business instructions that were to be opened only under specific circumstances. The implications were massive. Had Rick left behind a playbook for what to do when he was gone from the business? Was he planning for something he never told anyone about? Some speculated it was part of a larger succession plan, a way to ensure the pawn shop would stay intact, even if controversy or legal chaos broke out. Others believed it was emotional insurance, a way for Rick to communicate thoughts he could never say out loud to his sons or business partners. Either way, the vault became more than a rumor. It became a symbol of Rick's true legacy, a hidden layer to the man fans thought they knew inside and out. And yet, the biggest shock was still to come. Because one of those items, sealed in that vault, was never meant to be found. Among all the relics, blueprints, and priceless memorabilia stashed in Rick Harrison's secret vault, one item stood out above the rest, not for its value, but for the sheer mystery surrounding it. It was a single manila envelope. No flashy label. No contents listed. Just 5 ominous words written in Rick's unmistakable handwriting across the front. Do not open. Not yet. This wasn't the kind of message Rick would leave lightly. In fact, those who knew him said he wasn't the overly sentimental or cryptic type. So what was inside that envelope? And why did he feel the need to leave such an intense instruction? Rumors started swirling immediately after news of the vault broke. Some believed it was a confession, something Rick had kept bottled up for decades. Others thought it might be legal documents tied to long-forgotten deals or ownership disputes. A few even speculated it could be connected to his father, Richard the Old Man Harrison, and a controversial clause in his will that excluded one of Rick's brothers entirely. But what really set the internet on fire was a theory from a former family friend who claimed the envelope contained the location of a second hidden stash, a private collection of items Rick had allegedly removed from the shop's books and hidden away in another state. This theory suggested that Rick had built a separate legacy, one that even his children didn't fully know about. And here's where things got stranger. The envelope wasn't just unopened. It was reportedly sealed inside a lockbox, buried beneath a concrete slab in the rear of the vault. Rick had written a second note taped to the outside of that box. Only when it's time. That phrase set off alarm bells for his closest circle. When is it time? Time for what? Retirement? A sale? A scandal? Or something darker? Even though Rick hasn't publicly commented on this envelope, likely to maintain legal privacy, it's already become the centerpiece of countless fan theories, Reddit threads, and even a few unsanctioned investigative podcasts. People want to know what's inside, and more importantly, why Rick didn't just destroy it if he didn't want it seen. Some say the contents are too powerful, too personal, or too damaging to be released while he's still active in the public eye. Others believe it's just Rick playing the long game, crafting a mystery that will keep the Harrison name in headlines long after Pawn Stars fades into nostalgia. Whatever the reason, that envelope, unopened and untouched, has taken on a life of its own. And the envelope isn't the only surprise Rick tucked away. While mysterious envelope generated buzz and conspiracy theories, what truly stunned those closest to Rick Harrison was something much more raw: his personal journal. Tucked away beneath a stack of leather-bound ledgers and antique appraisal logs, the journal was filled cover to cover in Rick's tight, scribbly handwriting. It was never meant for public eyes, but once discovered, it instantly reframed everything people thought they knew about him. The journal, according to those who've seen excerpts, wasn't a daily log or a business notebook. It was an unfiltered window into Rick's mind. He'd started writing it more than 15 years ago, around the time Pawn Stars first aired. At first, the entries were all about the whirlwind of sudden fame, the chaos of production, and the surreal reality of becoming a household name. But soon, they became more personal. Much more. Rick detailed the stress of maintaining a public image, especially when the cameras stopped rolling. He confessed to sleepless nights, deep regrets, and even a few major secrets he kept from his team, his family, and his fans. One recurring theme: legacy. Rick wrestled with whether he was building something that would outlast him, or just playing a role in someone else's narrative. In one entry, he allegedly wrote, "Everyone sees me as the guy who knows what things are worth. But I've spent years trying to figure out what I'm worth when the doors close." That line alone shook those who knew him best. Even more surprising was how frequently Rick mentioned the old man. Despite their close bond on the show, Rick often questioned whether his father ever truly approved of the way he expanded the family business. He worried that turning the shop into a TV empire might have cheapened the very legacy he tried to honor. Then came the entries about his sons, especially Corey. Rick didn't just see Corey as a co-star or successor. He saw him as a mirror. In several pages, Rick confessed that he feared his mistakes would be repeated by the next generation. that Corey might carry the burden of fame without ever feeling the purpose behind it. There were even mentions of unresolved conflicts, which some believe could explain recent behind-the-scenes tension at the shop. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part. Toward the journal's end, Rick began listing items he wanted to be remembered for. Not cars, not rare coins, not old Civil War guns, but values. Hard work, sharp wit, and being real. Even when the cameras roll, he wrote. The journal didn't just shed light on Rick Harrison the businessman. It revealed Rick Harrison the father, the son, the man who constantly questioned whether he'd done enough or too much. And just when you think the story can't get more personal, wait until you hear about the family feud that started brewing behind the scenes. Despite the tightly knit image portrayed on Pawn Stars, the Harrison family wasn't without its fractures. And what many fans didn't realize was that behind the scenes, a slow-burning feud had been developing between Rick and his eldest son, Corey. It wasn't about money, or at least not just money. It was about power, trust, and legacy. Rick had always said that Corey would take over the business one day, and on the show, that looked like a natural progression. But in reality, Rick remained very hands-on, even as the years went on. Insiders revealed that Rick had a hard time letting go, not just of the shop, but of the control. While Corey wanted to innovate, modernize, and grow the online side of things, Rick was rooted in the old-school, handshake-deal face-to-face way of doing business. The tension wasn't loud. It didn't explode in public. It simmered. Subtle disagreements over appraisals turned into long silences. Corey's proposals for expanding into NFTs and cryptocurrency-backed collectibles were shot down by Rick, who reportedly told him, "We're not a tech startup, we're a pawn shop with personality." That moment, according to a staff member, marked a turning point. And then there was Adam Harrison, Rick's lesser-known son. While Adam had distanced himself from the show years ago and chose a path outside of TV, Rick's will and the content of the hidden room suggested Adam had never been completely out of the picture. In fact, some of Rick's personal notes hinted at reconnecting with Adam and making amends before it was too late. That decision apparently blindsided Corey, who had assumed he'd be the sole heir to the shop's inner workings. Corey reportedly felt betrayed, not just by the content of the journal, but by the direction Rick had taken with certain assets, particularly some undisclosed holdings in the shop's name that had been transferred into a private trust. A trust that, as it turns out, had both sons listed, something Corey allegedly hadn't known until the contents of Rick's safe came to light. At this point, those close to the family say that conversations turned tense. Not yelling, not physical, but cold, distant. Carefully worded text messages replaced casual phone calls. There were rumors of lawyers quietly circling the situation, not to dismantle anything, but to clarify, to ensure every word, every signature, every piece of the pie was accounted for. It became clear to those watching that this wasn't just about a pawn shop or a TV empire. It was about identity, inheritance, and unresolved emotional debts that no amount of gold bars or rare collectibles could settle. But if you think this family tension was explosive, wait until you hear what Rick secretly invested in, without telling anyone. It left even his closest friends completely stunned. As a businessman, Rick Harrison was no stranger to making big moves, but few knew the full extent of his hidden investments, quietly amassing wealth and influence in ways that were totally outside the world of pawn shops and television. To many, Rick was simply the affable shop owner from Pawn Stars, known for his sharp eye for valuable antiques and his dry humor. But the truth was far more complicated. According to multiple sources close to Rick, he was quietly involved in several high-stakes investments that span industries as diverse as real estate, tech startups, and even cryptocurrency. While his public persona remained grounded in the world of collectibles, those who had access to Rick's private records revealed something truly shocking. He had built a massive portfolio of assets that could completely change the way his family and the public viewed his legacy. One of the most surprising aspects of Rick's financial strategy was his sudden interest in real estate. Over the past decade, Rick had been quietly purchasing commercial properties in up-and-coming areas, many of which were located in some of the fastest-growing cities across the United States. These weren't small investments. Some of them were worth millions. His acquisitions ranged from historic buildings in downtown Las Vegas to multi-million-dollar complexes in California and Texas. No one, not even the family, knew how deep these ventures went. But perhaps the most startling revelation was Rick's involvement in the tech world. Despite his older school approach to business, Rick had invested in several cutting-edge tech startups, including companies focused on blockchain technology and artificial intelligence. These startups, though not household names, were poised to change entire industries, and Rick's investment in them had the potential to make him one of the biggest tech investors no one knew about. While he kept these ventures low-key, insiders suggest that Rick's hidden interests were intended to ensure his family's financial stability for generations to come. Corey and Rick's other children had no idea just how much Rick's wealth had grown beyond what was visible on television. Family attorneys have since been poring over the intricate details of Rick's portfolio to determine how these assets will be divided in the future. One insider revealed that Rick had also invested heavily in rare art, securing pieces from some of the most sought-after artists, many of which are now worth millions. These investments had been kept out of the public eye for a reason. Rick had been quietly curating a collection that would rival some of the most famous art collectors in the world. The shock came when the family discovered that Rick had left instructions to auction off the pieces in secret after his passing, with proceeds going to charitable foundations he had supported over the years. Rick's investment strategy wasn't just about making money, it was about securing a long-term legacy. And yet, despite the magnitude of his business ventures, none of these were things he ever spoke about on air. Instead, he continued his public role as the approachable, hard-working pawn shop owner. But now, with the secrets of his finances and investments spilling into the open, it was clear that Rick had been preparing for something much bigger than any of his TV fame. And that wasn't the only shock. What was found in Rick's hidden vaults next was even more unsettling. But the truth behind what was discovered next will change everything you thought you knew about Rick Harrison. When Rick Harrison passed away,
I never got anyone's help. I had to do it on my.
The TV personality who had built an empire on Pawn Stars left behind a collection that was much more than just valuable antiques. Hidden deep within his estate, Rick had amassed a vault containing some of the most controversial and mind-bending secrets anyone could imagine. This vault was rumored to be filled with not only financial records, but also artifacts and items of historical significance that could change the entire course of history. For years, Rick had been making cryptic comments about some of the incredible finds he'd encountered that were too important to be showcased. While viewers knew about the treasures displayed on the show, few had any idea what Rick had kept hidden away in private. The vault, which was secured with multiple layers of secrecy, including passwords, complex locks, and even a network of trusted associates, was only uncovered by his family after his death. As they began sifting through the hidden contents, they were stunned to find several items that appear to have historical implications. There were documents hinting at undiscovered tombs, ancient texts, and other items tied to forgotten civilizations. Among the most disturbing discoveries was a set of controversial paintings believed to be connected to famous figures in history, some of whom were involved in highly controversial events. These paintings were thought to have been lost to time, but Rick had somehow managed to acquire them decades ago. The implications of these acquisitions were staggering, and it raised more questions than answers. What did Rick know about these artifacts that he had never shared? And why had he kept them so secret? But that wasn't the most unsettling part. As the family delved deeper, they found a series of personal journals and letters that Rick had kept hidden away. In them, Rick made references to certain deals and business connections that were both mysterious and troubling. These documents seemed to suggest that Rick had been involved in transactions with shadowy figures in the black market for priceless relics. Some of these items were linked to illegal activities, and others hinted at connections to powerful global networks that no one had ever suspected Rick was a part of. What was even more alarming was the discovery of a tangled web of financial records that suggested Rick had been funneling money through various underground channels. It became clear that, beneath the surface of the popular TV personality everyone knew, Rick had been living a double life, one that had been carefully concealed from the public. His seemingly humble pawnshop empire was just the tip of the iceberg. In the vault, hidden away from view, Rick had left behind a treasure trove of secrets that few could comprehend. With each revelation, his family struggled to come to terms with the depths of his mysterious world, a world they had never known existed. The hidden vault revealed more than just material wealth. It revealed a side of Rick Harrison that could shatter the public's perception of who he truly was. What they discovered in this vault changed everything, and the truth behind it is more shocking than anyone could ever have imagined. But there's still one more element of Rick's legacy that will turn everything upside down, one last twist that no one could have predicted. As Rick Harrison's family continued to investigate the depths of his hidden vault, the final discovery emerged, a shocking twist that no one saw coming. Tucked away at the bottom of an old, weathered chest, hidden under stacks of dusty memorabilia, lay a sealed box with no identifying marks. Inside the box was a single letter, a letter from Rick himself. The letter, Rick revealed a startling truth that would forever alter the way the world saw him. He admitted to his involvement in a high-stakes, underground auction that spanned the globe, an auction that dealt with some of the rarest and most dangerous items ever to have existed. The letter detailed how Rick had been secretly compiling a collection of these artifacts for years, operating behind the scenes under the guise of his pawn shop empire. But it didn't stop there. Rick confessed to having made deals with individuals whose names were known only in whispered circles, individuals involved in illegal arms trading, art theft, and other shadowy industries. The extent of Rick's involvement was staggering. He had acquired these items of immense historical and cultural value not for the fame or fortune, but to protect them, to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. The most shocking revelation came when Rick described the items he had been holding on to in secret. Among them was an artifact known as the Serpent's Eye, believed to be a lost treasure of ancient royalty, thought to have been destroyed in the 17th century. According to Rick, the artifact had been passed through generations of secret societies, and its true power had never been fully understood. He believed that if it fell into the wrong hands, it could bring about unimaginable destruction. Rick's final wish, as stated in his letter, was for his family to destroy the artifacts to make sure they never saw the light of day. He had left behind the necessary documents to ensure they were destroyed or hidden away forever, never to be used again. In his letter, Rick expressed his fear that someone would come looking for these items, and that they would stop at nothing to obtain them. The family was left with a dilemma. Could they honor Rick's last request? Could they bring themselves to destroy such invaluable treasures? The decision was not taken lightly, and the legacy of Rick Harrison was left in their hands. This final twist, this hidden truth about Rick's life and legacy, left everyone who knew him questioning everything they thought they knew about the man behind the pawn shop. The legacy of Rick Harrison was not just about treasure hunting or the world-famous TV show. It was about a life led in secrecy, a life dedicated to protecting the past from forces that could have used it to reshape the future. What Rick Harrison left behind will change everything. But the real question remains, what happens next? With the truth finally exposed, the world is left to wonder. Who will be the next person to seek out the treasures Rick left behind, and what impact will it have on the future? The story of Rick Harrison is far from over. In fact, it may just be beginning.